So welcome everyone to our first Technology Earth webinar of 2023 here at Triple Ring Technologies. I'm Sheila Hemami. I lead the environment and sustainability business at Triple Ring, and I also lead the Triple Ring Boston office. Now today I'm coming to you from our office in the South Bay and the San Francisco Bay Area. Triple Ring's longstanding mission is to improve human health through innovative technologies. And we now recognize that human health is intimately intertwined with having a healthy planet. And we're applying our capabilities as a natural extension of our mission. And this Technology Earth webinar series is a natural expansion for us. In this series, we convene world experts and technologists working on a variety of environmental challenges to frame the problems and the challenges of scale up and to discuss viable solutions. Our goal is to connect individuals working in these problem spaces with the innovation ecosystem that has so successfully delivered life-changing solutions in the biotech space. And thank you very much for joining us today. Now, before we start, I'll mention some of the logistics of our webinar today. Please pose your questions in the Q&A box. The questions will be moderated. We'll take a few questions after each speaker, and then we'll open to the entire panel for a panel discussion at the end. Now, today, our topic is maximizing aquaculture efficiency toward meeting future protein needs of the planet's growing population in a sustainable and a scalable manner. We'll hear from three speakers with unique perspectives on the problem. Our first speaker, Dr. Michael Tlusty, will introduce and frame the problem for us. He's an associate professor of sustainability and food solutions in the School for the Environment at the University of Massachusetts, Boston. And his efforts and his experience around this topic are quite diverse and include in the fieldwork, assessing the environmental impact of salmon aquaculture in Canada, advocating for sustainable production with major buyers while at the New England Aquarium, and additionally serving as a judge in the F3 Challenge. Now, Michael has written eloquently about his thoughts on this topic, and I encourage you to visit his website and to read his blog posts and other commentaries. So with that, Michael, I hand the baton to you to frame the problem for us.
Thank you. You can hear me fine?
Yes.
Okay, and I'm going to share my screen now. All right, thank you. It's great to kick off 2023 with such a critical topic for aquaculture. I wanted to start my talk by saying, aquaculture is such a new industry, but really, when you think about it, it has been around for quite some time. Carp was estimated to be domesticated in China in 6200 BC. And these are actually carp ponds in probably about the same area where it began. So it's been going for quite a while there. We have 800-year-old fish ponds in Hawaii. This is in the Czech Republic, Trevon. This carp pond was actually built in the mid-1300s. And so it's been around for a while, but yet we keep asking ourselves, is aquaculture going to help feed the world? And that brings up the newness of aquaculture. And really, it's new to the developed world. In the developing world, it's a major protein source. It's been around, it's been very important. But really for our markets, particularly in North America and again, developed countries, it's really this new protein we're beginning to try to understand. And so because it's new, there's really kind of three things we really need to do. And this is actually any food system, but the three big challenges are, how do we create more? We are going to put more people on the world. And so the question is, how do we feed those people? We need to waste less. If you put all of our food waste together, it's equivalent to the third largest country, basically, in terms of greenhouse gas emission impacts. And a lot of this is just figuring out what we're doing and just doing a better job at it. And some of the way we need to do this is actually through changing minds. And so I am a judge with the F3 competition. And this is just a group that's gotten together. We put on challenges every now and then to kind of say, hey, aquaculture, what can you do? And so our first challenge was just fish-free feed. How do we create feed that doesn't use fish to make fish? And so that was in 2015. We then did a fish oil challenge. How do we come up with an oil that can substitute for fish oil, since that's so important? And our current challenge is a carnivore edition, which is how do we do salmon, and then we have a competition for shrimp, and then we have a competition for all other carnivorous species. But the idea is out there is to create a buzz about, hey, we can do this, we can do things different, and this is the way forward. But really, it's all comes down to efficiency and how can we do things better? How can this lead to more food? And so I've written in the past about how we produce it. And in this, we talk about, if you look at for 3 different species of fish, there's the size that goes to market, but then you can actually grow smaller fish. The benefit of smaller fish is they're juveniles, they're putting on flesh faster from feed. So their feed conversion ratios are better. There's less mortality because they spend less time in the pond. And so we've shown with a variety of species that you could actually increase production approximately 50% just by taking fish out of the pond at a smaller size. The problem is that's not what we want as consumers. We want big fish, probably a hangover from fisheries thinking, oh, a big fish is from a healthy population. But so we need to get this behavior change, but there's this efficiency issue sitting right in front of us that we could do things much better. I've also published about processing and the amount of value and food that can come off of what we typically throw away. And this was work that was actually done. Julian Stevens did a lot of this work in Scotland in salmon processors, by mixing the offal with the blood waste, it had to be degraded to essentially fertilizer. And just this simple fact of valuing your waste, it led to a 200% improvement in the amount of food that was coming off, because all these parts could start going to specialty markets. You could get more value because you were actually not sinking it down to a low common denominator. So again, these are super simple fixes. We can go into our current systems and just say, how do we tweak it and how do we do it a little bit differently? You know, how we use it. This is a blog I wrote called Eat Too Much Protein, Piss Away Sustainability. Think about it. We don't store protein in our body. It's nitrogen. The way we get rid of nitrogenous waste is through urea and urine. So anytime we overconsume protein, if we eat a ½ ounce fillet of fish, half of that is actually going to end up as waste products from the protein standpoint. So even as consumers, we need to do these little efficiency tweaks and be better. So more smaller portions is the rule there. So really, you know, the question kind of keeps popping up, and, you know, there's a lot of statements. Aquaculture is going to feed the world. When you talk in a global food system and they talk about feeding the world, they're talking about calories. We have enough calories to feed everybody in the world. We have to distribute them better. What we don't have are the nutrients. So this is the amount of omega-3 fatty acids, the long chain omega-3 fatty acids, and it's where it's coming from. Most of it's coming from salmon. And this bar here, the availability in 2019, is based on what we ate. This is based on what the USDA recommends we eat. The problem is USDA recommends we eat 8 ounces a week of seafood. We're only that's 26 pounds a year. We're actually only eating 16 pounds a year. We're actually not even eating enough fish to get us up to the recommended level of omega-3, which is 250 micrograms per day. So really, when we talk about seafood and feeding the world, we really need to start focusing in on efficiency and these nutrients, which are going to be so important. And also thinking about how it plays into these other food systems. So again, 3 ways to do this: create more, waste less, do a better job. They're all interrelated. You know, by valuing your waste, you're actually creating more. By doing a better job, you're wasting less. So these things start folding in on each other and creating some more elegant solutions than what we have. And so, again, this was to put this in a larger context. And now we're going to actually hear from Larry and Timothy about how what their companies are doing to actually focus in on some of these efficiency things.
All right, Michael, thank you very much. That was a incredibly efficient framing of a big problem and very, very succinctly put. I have so many questions about what I should be eating as a person, so I'll hold those. So as Michael segued, our second speaker today is Dr. Larry Feinberg, who is an entrepreneurial industrial biotechnologist and CEO and co-founder of KnipBio. Now, Larry's pathway to sustainable fish feed was motivated by his personal commitment to eating sustainably, and he directed this passion into addressing the sustainability of feed. He's blended that mission with his expertise in early stage technology ventures and bioproduct discovery, and he's going to tell us about KnipBio and their alternative to fish meal. Larry.
Great. Thanks so much for that introduction. And Michael, nice job framing the discussion today. Really glad to be part of this panel. So thanks so much. Yeah, so Larry Feinberg, CEO, founder at KnipBio. And Michael was one of the very first folks I met in this sector. So it's all things seem to come around in time at least. So a little bit about our technology and our process. Walk you through about a couple different ideas here. But as Michael really well framed, we have a real opportunity to create a delicious, nutritious protein, but we need a lot of it, at least, according to projections. And the amount of farm-raised fish is expected to double by the end of this decade, with the vast majority of it coming from fish that require formulated, compounded feeds that require ingredients. So where are these ingredients going to come from, and how are we going to do it in a way that's consistent with Michael's message of doing better and producing more? And so first off, people should eat fish. Okay, it's delicious. And so yeah, I'm pretty evangelical about it. But think about it. What other protein is so diverse, where you have a carnivorous salmon compared to a crustacean that wears its house on its back, and everything in between? And so we have a real beautiful source of protein that we're learning how to farm lots of different species, not just one or two like we have in poultry, or one for cow, for example. So we have a real opportunity to make delicious, diverse foods, but we have to do it in a better way. And part of it is expanding the basket of ingredients that goes in, but also using those ingredients to make better, more nutritious feeds, because a little bit of you are what you eat and what they eat too. And so it's unacceptable today that the amount of loss of mortality loss and other inefficiencies that occur on the farm today. And it's probably only going to get worse and more complicated in the future with climate change and warming waters and other compounding factors. So a bit about our biotechnology. We actually work with a leaf symbiont. This is a bacteria that grows on the surface of leaves. And not only is it a beautiful source of protein, very strong amino acid composition, but also has these carotenoids, these antioxidants. Some of them are pigmenting and provide color, and others are just very strong immunonutritional compounds. But there's a whole range of different strains that we've been able to develop within our library to provide different precise forms of nutrition that we can alter the different ratios, whether it's compounds that are important for the gut microbiome or other immunonutritional benefits, or even antimicrobial activities that provide some degree of resistance in the case of disease. So it's a very versatile platform that we can then amplify with our tools and make a very interesting suite of products. So here's a quick little video overview, okay, where we start with our pink stuff in a culture and a shake flask. Of course, we want to make sure that it's clean and good, and we scale it up first in these bags here, these wave bags that then get inoculated into a 1,000-liter fermenter. This is all aerobic fermentation, scaling up, going from 1,000 all the way up to 50,000. And of course, we're keeping close eyes on the reactors as they grow. That's what the inside looks like. A little bit of extra love goes a long way into these reactors, into these fermentations. But they're a very predictable process. That's a centrifuge where you then harvest, and that's what our product actually looks like. It's a dry flour that can be milled very easily, and then we produce these barrels that then get milled into feeds that, of course, will then get fed to fish. And we fed lots of different forms of like I mentioned earlier. This is barramundi, and of course salmon, and we'll have some pictures here coming up. That's again barramundi, but we'll have some pictures of trout as well. And so at this point, what part of the point of this video is the whole cycle has been closed, and that's the Boston Seafood Show. And so going from our little shake flask all the way to sushi grade product, and that's how we've been able to demonstrate quite a bit. Oop, I lost my screen, but so at this point, so not only have we scaled up at large scale, but we have several dozen animal trials under our belt. Not only have I tried and tasted this product, but of course we've eaten the fish that have eaten our product as well, and it tastes amazing. We are an early recipient of a US FDA approval, but also having an additional approval in Canada as well. And there's a fair amount of intellectual property behind this development pathway here. So just to hone in on a specific business case that we really have focused in at this point is in the juvenile stage, there can be a lot of losses in a lot of different ways. And one of them is from handling, is from moving the fish, for example, from indoor nursery where the conditions are pretty controlled and stable to outdoors or in a process called outplanting. And so it's not uncommon to see a big bottleneck occur here at this point where you have losses. And so one way in the spirit of Michael's We Can Do Better is not to have so much loss in the first place and to improve overall production and efficiency at the farm level. And so that's the name of our product that we're going to market is called Juve, really to supply this juvenile stage in fish. And so we routinely see improved performance with fish that are fed our ingredient Juve. But here in the case of a cold water disease outbreak, which is even as a farmer, you never know when these things are going to pop up, and it's going to be quite unpredictable. We see improved rates of survival compared to the controls, but we also see a delay in the presentation of the diseases. So really important, especially with this next piece of data that I'm going to show. When you transfer these fish or when they're in the face of a challenge like a disease, for example, it's not uncommon for them to lose their appetite, come off a feed for some time. And in a subjective scaling score between 1 being completely uninterested in feed and 4 being attacking the feed like boiling water, we actually have seen multiple times over and over again that fish that are fed our feed with our ingredient do not lose their appetite. They maintain their zest and their hunger, which is really important, especially in this specific context where you have a disease outbreak and you're really desperate to get a medicated feed into these animals. Now you have a window where it's extended by, in this case, more than a week, but also they're actually able to take to the feed. So it's a really critical way to maintain the level of productivity, the health, and overall, ultimately, the quality of the fish as well. So the stage that we're at is we're manufacturing and we're scaling, and our product has launched and we're on commercial farms. And so we are bringing this product to market as we speak and figuring out how to make even more of our product in a way that's even more cost effective as we continue to mature. So that's a quick overview, and thanks so much for the opportunity to present today.
All right. Thank you very much, Larry, and sort of a tip to tail there in terms of coverage from start to finish. So our final speaker today is Dr. Timothy Bouley, founder and CEO of Biofeyn, a life sciences company pioneering new forms of nutrient delivery to improve efficiencies for food systems and sustainability. Now, he brings a very broad perspective to the problem, having established several of the first programs in planetary health at the World Bank around climate change, One Health, and oceans. And it is with this perspective that he decided to commit his time and resources to improving aquaculture through a very targeted approach and technology. So I will turn the floor over to him now to tell you more. Timothy, please.
Great, Dr. Hemami, thank you very much. It's very exciting to be here for a number of reasons, not least of which that company that's an organization that's focused on human health and well-being is taking this interest in aquaculture and fish farming. I think that's a really critical piece of the puzzle. So now let me just throw up my my screen here, share this, and we'll get started. All right, everybody can see that? Great, let's go. All right, so you've heard about this today. I like to start with this slide just because it's very pretty. These are really lovely salmon swimming around in their pen. These guys look happy, I think. They're sort of well fed, a lot of nutrients in there, nice fat fish. getting ready for harvest. This is another type of farming. This is out off the coast of Baja California. You can see it's kind of the same story. There's lots of different types of aquaculture. And so I think it's important just to start with some visuals to frame this. Dr. Tlusty did this to start as well. And I think you can't have enough nice images to frame what actually aquaculture looks like. Dr. Hemami has a photo of this in her background as well, which is an aerial shot of what some of these pens look like. Yeah, exactly. And then this here is just another type of aquaculture, shrimp farming. This is also taking place in Baja California. And you can see this is no longer out in the open ocean, but is onshore. And in there, you've got millions and millions and millions of shrimp. And then this is one of the latest innovations in this space. These are indoor recirculating aquaculture facilities. So you're taking this out of the ocean, out of the open environment of the land, and putting it in very biosecure facilities. And there's many reasons for doing this, but you can enhance aquaculture output. You can remove sort of environmental variables. And indeed, there are many challenges with this. At the moment, this represents about sort of 1% of production in the salmon industry, and is not very much of the rest of the global industry as well. But you can see how technologically sophisticated aquaculture is getting. It's no longer just pulling fish out of the ocean. This is using some of the latest technology in the world to be able to farm these species. Aquaculture, we've heard this as well. It's about a $200 billion industry today. It's the fastest growing food production sector. I think that's important to remember. There's a lot of work happening in agricultural innovation, and aquaculture absolutely is one of these spaces. You listen to some of the leaders in international food systems speak, and they are convinced that aquaculture is really the future of animal protein, given its relative climate impact and sustainability benefits. Which are some of these? Salmon farming, fish farming generally has a much lower carbon footprint than many of its land-based counterparts. It, of course, uses much land because it's happening in the water, and you can grow these animals in very high density. And you don't have the same kind of animal density issues that you do in some of these other farm species. Indeed, there are some density issues, but it's not comparable to, say, like cows. They have a much lower feed conversion ratio, meaning that you can get more food into these animals, convert that into the body tissue that we can eat. And then they have a very high edible yield. You very often get a whole fish on your plate, and you can eat a lot of that. But try to think of the last time you got a whole pig on your plate, or a whole cow. Not the same category. But if we're going to truly address this field, we need to, as the name of this webinar would imply, think about feed. This is feed pellets that are fed to salmon. They're actually pretty good. If you're in this industry for long enough, you sample these things from time to time. They taste kind of like crackers. I would recommend tasting them before they're infused with the omega-3s, the fish oils, but they're pretty good. You can imagine eating them on a plate with some cheese, and the fish seem to like these as well. But there's many challenges with these feed pellets. This is one of them. These feed pellets are composed of many fish oils and fish meals. How do we get those? Well, you have to source those from someplace. So this is an example of that sourcing. And so in addition to capturing fish for human consumption directly, you're capturing fish to feed to other fish. That can be inherently problematic when the fish that you're eating require more fish inputs than you're getting out of the system. This is a metric in the industry known as the FIFO, the fish in or fish out ratio. For salmon, it hovers somewhere between 1.1 to 1.5, but for some other species, it can be high as 4 or 5, which is not great from an environmental standpoint. Then you have this is the rainforest. It's being deforested to grow soy. It's not always how soy is grown, but it is in some cases. That's problematic, particularly when this is happening in, say, South America, and you then have to ship that soy to other places in the world. Not great. And then you have this. You have high intensity processes to refine these ingredients and to get them into the meals. These can be very energy intensive, and you can produce a lot of carbon emissions in this process. Again, not great for environmentally friendly food. So you look at these trend lines. Aquaculture is going up like this, but the natural resources are going down like this. So you have a problem. And it's not just fish stocks, it's soy, it's meals, it's other kinds of protein inputs that are decreasing and becoming increasingly difficult to access, to incorporate into this aquaculture system. So the big problem number one in the industry that our company is addressing is that the industry will in fact run out of natural resources. I know that sounds like a crazy thing to say, but you look at the trajectory of the industry. Take salmon farming in Norway, an industry that I work in. The government has set targets of 4xing or 5xing this industry over the next 25 years. At the moment, there's currently 350 million farmed salmon in Norway. And if you're going to 4x or 5x that means you also, under current technology parameters, need to increase feed ingredients by 4x or 5x. That's an issue. These are some of the examples of ingredients that we're working with. We're not replacing proteins. So Dr. Feinberg, he talked about this in his technology. What we're focusing on are another component of the feed, which are these high value ingredients, things like colorants and vitamins and minerals and different plant-based compounds. These things also can be very expensive. In some instances, thousands of dollars a kilogram. And that's sort of implicates the problem here as well, that as these ingredients become more scarce, they're also going to become even more expensive and increase prices for this protein that's actually so essential for global populations. This is trend lines of fish meal prices over the past 30 years. As you can see, it's variable and it's going up. Not great if you're a salmon farmer or another fish farmer and you've got to buy this stuff to put into your animals. So big problem number two is that ingredients are expensive and it's getting worse. And then you have this. So this is just a schematic of one particular feed ingredient that's used. Say you start with 1 kilogram of astaxanthin. Astaxanthin is the colorant that makes salmon and shrimp pink. Can be as much as $2,500 per kilogram. It's a very, very tricky molecule to work with. It's big, it's sticky, and it's very prone to degradation. So in the manufacturing process, you may have 20% of that's lost. In the storage process, another 25% goes away because it interacts with different ingredients in the feed, and you're down to 60%. And then during digestion, you may have another 30% that's lost due to breakdown from stomach acid, and then absorption. It's an imperfectly absorbed molecule, and so you have 20% that's lost there. So what that means is that you may only have 10% of this stuff that actually is absorbed and makes it into the animal cells. That's not really great when something is so expensive and environmentally scarce. So the real root problem here is that these ingredients are inefficient, and we need to find ways to make them better if we're going to improve the industry as a whole, improve animal health, and decrease resource use. So enter these little fellows. These are our friends. These are nanoparticles. They've been around for many, many decades in human health and medicine. Many of the drugs and nutrients that we consume as humans are encapsulated in some way. They're delivered. And the reason that that is done is because through this process of encapsulation, you can protect critical ingredients, whether that be a medicine or a nucleic acid in a vaccine or a nutrient, protect them in the stomach acid and get them to where they need to go in the tissue. And so these folks are efficiency enhancing mechanisms that can be combined with these critical feed nutrients to improve the overall system. So there again, it is an efficiency multiplier to minimize resource use and reduce cost. And so what this does is that this addresses the root problem as well as big problem number one in the industry and big problem number two. This technology is hot for many reasons, but it's most recently been used in the coronavirus vaccines. So put your hand up if you received a COVID vaccine. Probably just about everybody on this call. These COVID vaccines are comprised of two parts. One is a nanoparticle and the other is an mRNA nucleic acid. And the reason that you put that mRNA in that nanoparticle is that it protects it. So when it enters into the bloodstream, it's not degraded and it can get to the target cells that it needs to get to. So in precisely the same way, we're taking our little nanoparticle package, we're putting something inside it and we're protecting it and getting it to where it needs to go in the animal body. This is a closer view of the technology. You have a nanostructure, you have an ingredient inside. We're calling it a fine. Our company's Biofeyn, named after Richard Feynman, the father of nanotechnology. We thought this was cute, and it seems to work. These are all natural, they're biodegradable, they're non-polluting, and they're industry approved. We're using only ingredients that are already used in the industry. We get a lot of questions about this, but we're using pre-approved aquaculture ingredients. You can make these little particles out of lots of different things, many of which are naturally occurring in the environment and the ocean. Many algae-derived products, for example, are great illustrations of this and is a nice demonstration of circular economy. So let's go back to our example ingredient here, astaxanthin. very expensive, $2,500 a kilo, goes through feed and digestion. You get, say, 16% retained generously. That means you have $400 on the $2,500 investment that you put into this. With our technology, we can increase that fivefold. That means 80% goes into the cells. And that means on your $2,500 investment, you're getting $2,250 back, which is a market improvement over the $400 return that you get under ordinary circumstances. These savings really add up. So you take our technology, 5x cost savings, apply it to the $200 billion aquaculture industry, of which about 50% are feed ingredients, which means that in the end, you're only spending now $20 billion on feed ingredients for a cost savings of about $80 billion. Economists in the room will be able to poke holes in this from every direction. This is merely illustrative to demonstrate how this savings can stack up and the importance of this kind of efficiency enhancement to the industry. Ultimately, we're creating value across the supply chain, from ingredient producer to feed producer to farmer. These enhancements are passed on to retail and ultimately the consumer, which will be delivered a healthier, more sustainable product. And then, of course, there's value creation for nature. We no longer have to take as many fish out of the ocean. We no longer have to continue to deforest in the way that we are, because we can save the impact on this environment by making overall fish feed more sustainable. This is just a bit of an illustration of how this works in fish. So this particular fish here, we'll call him Frank. We fed Frank a very high concentration of a colorant to demonstrate the principle of our technology. As you can see, Frank looks sort of like an ordinary trout. Maybe he's a little bit more pigmented, but not terribly so. And then we took that same pigment and we encapsulated it using Biofeyn technology, and we reduced the concentration from 15 times down to 1, and this is what you had. And so you can see that there is a marked coloration difference in this fish, and that is because this nanoparticle and its payload tracked to the tissue that it needed to get to, which was the mucosal membrane of this fish. That's important for two reasons. One, because we were able to reduce the amount that you needed by at least 15 times. And secondly, we were able to track this compound to the mucosal membrane of the fish, which is where a lot of the fish diseases happen. These animals get bacterial and parasitic infections. And so if you're going to address those, you need to get something to the membrane of the fish to prevent that. So we're ready to go from day one. We can take our technology, we can integrate it into a basic protein composition, create enhanced feed, and get healthier and more efficient fish. There are many folks that are working to enhance aquafeed, which is really great. Folks that are producing insect feeds and seaweed products, fermentation products, as we've heard about, algae omegas, essential oils, new types of medicines and vaccines. For us as a company, we don't like the word competition, but actually we think these are collaborators and partners. We can work with any of them to make their technology better. We can encapsulate products. If the products that they're developing are too big, we can encapsulate very small compounds, integrate that into their larger products to create more nutritionally complete feeds for the industry overall. This is our team. We got some really cool folks, a lot of medical scientists, a lot of people who like to spend time in the water. We spend a lot of our life up in the Arctic. We have a close collaboration with a salmon farm where we're developing this work. And we are trying to build this from all dimensions, drawing in talent from biomedical science, aquaculture, and then, logistics. Who better than the US Army to go for logistics as we scale this up? The aquaculture industry needs a lot of feed, and in order to get that feed to these animals, you got to figure that out. So why not find the smartest guys in the room and help them do that? Help us do that. We have a great team, lots of very excellent investors coming from both the world of biomedicine and the world of agriculture and aquaculture. We have some really excellent research partners, and we continue to build that up. Truly, this is a team sport. We're not going to solve this on our own. We need to be working with very smart folks like those on the line today to truly enable this industry. And so what's in our future? Well, we're starting very small, literally with these nanoparticles, tackling this $200 billion industry, which is farmed fish. And this technology doesn't end there. It can be applied to animal agriculture globally. And so you can have emerging technology coming out of this aquaculture space, demonstrating the fundamental importance of nailing something in this smaller target market to enable the broader global meat production industry. So that's it. I'll start there. This is not a photo of our company just yet. This is the aspiration. But you know, as a startup, you got to go big or go home. So that's where we are. One day we'll have a building down here in Cambridge. So, all right.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Thanks to all of you. At this point, I'd like to open the floor to questions. And my experience is that I need to ask a question first to sort of precipitate our audience into getting over their shyness. So I'm going to pose a question, and to remind everybody, I'm an electrical engineer by training. So I trust that you guys will fix my question, adjust it appropriately, and I'll say, you know, discuss amongst yourselves. So one thing that strikes me in looking at generating, you know, resource efficient, sustainable food for aquaculture is we are pushing the synthesis lower on the food chain. And I contrast that with what we're seeing with, of course, the protein replacements for humans, you know, synthetic honey, synthetic cheese, synthetic dairy. And this is not addressing directly for human consumption, but going down on the food chain. And can you address the relative efficiency and sustainability of that? Where is there an optimal point? Is it achievable to create synthetic foods for humans? Is this sort of a good transition technology, or is this really the point where we should be targeting?
I'm waiting.
I can take a first stab at that response. You know, so I think definitely there are laws of thermodynamics efficiencies, and you go lower down on the food chain for sure. And Michael's point about forage fish, you know, and going sort of lower and smaller fish, I think is one example of that. Our example with microbes being sort of another demonstration of that concept. You know, in terms of synthetic foods like alternative honeys or cellular ag, I think they're interesting and exciting. That they have a journey in terms of tech development and scale up and product acceptance by the consumer market. So why I think aquaculture is a very reasonable and sound place to start is fish are of course already an important part of so many people's diets, especially in parts of the world that are expanding most rapidly, both in numbers as well as affluence. So it's a fantastic place to start, is to make sure that our existing supply chains are broadened and expanded in a way that is going to make most or maximal impact.
Yeah, and Sheila, I would address that by thinking food is really, we eat a portfolio of food. We don't eat a single thing. We don't make one decision and go, oop, I'm sustainable. We make 100 food decisions every day on what we're going to eat. And so again, in kind of this do a better job, today, if you make 50 good decisions, tomorrow make 51 good decisions, you know, and it's always just, what are those options we can have? The other thing that's super fascinating in any food system is that there's always a trade-off. Nothing happens for free ever. And so we can talk about the bioreactor type work that Larry's doing, and these cell-based meat are coming up against, but there's a real energy cost to that. And so the question is, how are we measuring impact? What are we doing? You know, in terms of aquaculture, and Timothy, you had a picture of a land-based system. Great, but again, super energy intensive, super subject to storms, where a cage in the ocean, if you know a storm's coming, you can pull it under and the storm can pass over it. So there's the reason we don't have, Larry attributed, for terrestrial, we only eat cows, pigs, and chickens. We eat 500 aquaculture species because there's not that single one best species for everybody.
I guess I'll just chime in on top of that too, since we'll round it out. But I mean, I like these alternative proteins as well. I mean, I think that there's room for innovation in this space. You know, humans have been innovating in agriculture for thousands of years, and cellular agriculture, you know, different use fermentation products, other things that are in this new food space are critical because they're going to push this dialogue further. They're going to help us develop new innovations. But the aquaculture industry is really in a unique position. And one of the reasons that we're working in it is that it's an industry that's ready to go. It's already operating at scale. It's a $200 billion industry. There are infrastructures set up for integrating these feed inputs, for farming these species. That is not true of, say, cellular agriculture. Not only is the science not quite there, there's no infrastructure for developing this. You know, growing thousands of kilos of meat in a factory is no small task, not least of which from a bacterial infection standpoint or thermostability standpoint or whatever. But the ocean is there. You know, we know how to farm fish. And so if we're going to meet the protein demands of this population, we need to start with something that's ready to go from day one. And aquaculture certainly is that in many ways.
So what I'm hearing, I think a nice theme out of that is, while every new technology and new concept needs to scale, the challenges of scaling here are significantly reduced. They are challenges of, perhaps logistics. I mean, yes, there's scale up, but it's not we need a $300 million capital investment in order to achieve our next milestone in terms of going something forward. Yes?
There's scale up, there's also scale out. So, one way we talked about taking this webinar initially was talking about what do you do with all the small farmers? There's 500,000 shrimp farmers in Vietnam, each with a pond themselves. And a lot of that goes to local production. It's not the global production, And so, we need to be a little bit careful of, again, aquaculture is not a unity function. There's a lot of different things. And as both Larry and Timothy were talking, I kept thinking about the small farmer and what can we do to help get those products into small farmers to help them do better. And some of it is really, again, through the feeds, and a lot of these small farmers don't even feed. And so it's a totally different system. But again, you also have to start somewhere. And once you start somewhere, then you gain that momentum and you can then adapt into other sectors.
Okay, so we've gotten a nice collection of questions. Those of you that ask questions, I'm going to go out of order, but do not despair. There's a method to this. So, all right, so let me start with this one. Is there any likelihood of eventually bringing sunshine-based aquaculture products into this food chain? Large ponds making algal feedstocks that are more palatable to fish than to humans. Would that be financially possible? Does this happen? Are you aware of this? Is there, your thoughts?
Yeah, pond algae being raised in outdoor environments has been pursued for some time. First, perhaps in the biofuels era, excuse me. And it is problematic because it's hard to keep things from floating in, like bacterial infections, but it's also as they start to grow, ironically, they start to block light. And so you have to then add energy by mixing. So it gets complicated pretty quick. So a lot of algae producers have often follow the same course, which is to then do dark fermentations or heterotrophic fermentations using sugar instead. So I think there's possibly we can get better bioreactors and do better systems with sunlight and producing algae, but our current state is not where it needs to be.
Michael, Timothy, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say that in terms of algae, there are also producers that are growing this in bioreactors. I've got a can of it over in my kitchen right now, and this is in microalgae. And what these microalgae produce are omega-3s, which can be integrated into animal feed. And these omega-3s are actually really high quality. Fish like them, they taste good, and they can have a blended combination of DHA and EPA. which is important variably for fish health and human health. There's a lot of innovation that's happening in that space too, not least of which for moving away from other sources of omega-3s, but also because it can be a very sustainable technology. It's a little bit energy intensive right now, and so the carbon emissions aren't that great, but with time, I think that these factories can get better and produce, as the person who asked the question said, sort of a sunshine sort of derived food product.
And wasn't a lot of the initial astaxanthin produced through algal sources?
Of course, sure. Yeah. And those ponds are certainly very colorful, right? And so, yeah, they're very dramatic in the way they do it. Dr. Bouley, I'm wondering, was that a photobioreactor you have in your cabinet, or is that a dark fermentation? What do you have over there?
And actually, one thing I was going to say is going back to the microalgae and the omega-3s, fish aren't synthesizing their own omega-3s, they're actually eating it from the microalgae. So all of the benefits of eating fish from microalgae actually derive from the benefits of eating fish for the omega-3 benefits are really all incorporated from the microalgal sources, either naturally or again through diets. And this is where again it's so critical that we actually don't back off on. We need these omega-3 sources, especially in aquaculture, so we have proper nutrition in the fishery.
So I think that's a nice segue into the next question, which looks, I'm going to say very, very much farther out in terms of aquaculture. And now we're talking about, essentially taking the fish as it evolved and making it as healthy as possible and to generate the high yield in an aquaculture environment. And the question is, do you see aquaculture evolving to, and I'm going to paraphrase here, designing the fish and evolving the fish to producing vitamin-rich fish with minimal waste? So essentially using very, very controlled environments and controlled variables to reduce overall waste. And I'll say, Michael, I'm in agreement with you that the recirculating aquaculture is good in theory, and I think probably very, very challenging for us to execute in practice right now. But do you see the field going in the direction of really trying to tweak the fish itself as a protein source and source of nutrients for humans?
I do see part of the industry going that way, and kind of the scale up, the going to land-based system. When you have a land-based system, you're a little bit more efficient on your feed, so you have less feed waste. You can capture the waste, and then you can actually use it in some manner. If it's particulate waste, getting it out as a fertilizer on crops. So it gives you options. There's also a real push towards, just as there is in agriculture, towards regenerative systems. And so it's really, how do you go to integrated multi-trophic systems where you have a fish such as a trout and you have mussels that are taking up some of the particulate waste, and then you have seaweed around that's taking up some of the dissolved nutrient waste. And so by doing some of these ITMA systems, you're kind of recreating a quasi ecosystem, but again, it's you're growing things that are feeding on the waste of other things, and you're getting some duplicity, but also some efficiency there.
I think there's also a movement in the industry to establish precision aquaculture, and in doing so, you're optimizing what these animals are getting, and on the back end of that, you have optimized nutrient content in these fish. And so there's not necessarily a need to, say, genetically engineer these animals. I mean, that's happened in some cases. There's a company in the United States which has produced genetically engineered salmon, which is interesting, and it seems to be working, but it's engineered to grow rapidly and gain weight. But that's not always necessary. Keep going back to salmon because that's the industry they're working in, but farmed Atlantic salmon are pretty different than their wild counterparts. And that's because these animals have been reared for a long time now, and they have been fed a certain way. They don't have to hunt anymore. And so these animals have been domesticated in the same way that farm animals on land have been. And then ultimately at the end of the life cycle, these animals are only as good as what they've been fed. So you can optimize their feeding with certain nutrients and get what you want out of them that way. And that's what we're focused on as a company, is optimizing these nutrients to create some precise nutrient densities. And maybe in the future, we'll be able to even specifically calibrate that. Say, all right, you want an omega range between this and this, and you want a vitamin D range between this and this. This is something that we can potentially provide with this application of medical technology to fish.
Yeah, just a real quick addition, because I think it's already been summed up nicely, but I think not so much, there's a tremendous amount happening in breeding programs, and aquaculture is literally millennia behind other species. So there will be advances in husbandry for sure. But probably the precision nutrition happens below the level of the animal, just to build on Timothy's comment about, they are carriers of these ingredients. And so if we can design better delivery systems that have better payloads, like in Biofeyn's case, or better nutrient profiles, like in our case, where they're going to be offered these ingredients that they're able to uptake more easily and more completely. That's probably the nearer term route to having a more diverse and more nutritious protein.
So a scale up question here. On when one looks at the scale of global aquaculture, and I think, Timothy, you put up some nice numbers to frame that. The question is it realistic that global marine ingredient supplies could ever be replaced by non-fish sources in aquaculture feed?
I would say in the short term, no. And it's a really good ingredient also. And so when you say replace, I think we actually have to do better than. And so, what then is better than what is already something that's considered 70% protein approximately, and has a source of DHAs and EPA. And so there's a lot of different pieces to assemble there to rebuild if you're going to try to wholly replace it. But it is absolutely a limited resource, capped off at a very specific volume. So how do we continue the growth trajectory, even if we don't replace it? I think idealistically, there might be some different philosophies even on this call, but ultimately that comes down, in my opinion, to consumer preference. What do the diners want? What do the farmers want? And they help lead a lot of that conversation.
Yeah, we're kind of getting into a storytelling mode here of, what's the future going to bring? But, in 1930, the thought of artificial nitrogen for fertilizer was not thought of, and now 70% of the nitrogen in our body is man-made. So, are we ever going to get to all of it? Probably not all of it, but we're only supposed to have about 4 billion people on the planet. The fact that we just kind of crossed 8 billion means that we've been able to stretch and create more resources than the planet actually can provide. So, we keep pushing boundaries. That's kind of what we do as a human species.
So I think we mentioned consumers in answering that last question. So I think I'll wrap two more questions into one, and Michael, maybe I'll direct these to you for starters, especially given the work that you did at New England Aquarium with sort of the community writ large. And these questions are, first, how do we convince consumers to eat more fish? Because it is a more sustainable protein source for humans than a lot of land-based options. And secondly, then taking a step back, and this is a big philosophical question. So maybe, why not focus more energy on, or let me rephrase that as, what are the challenges in rebuilding wild fisheries today toward trying to get nature back up to where it is? And I think the population is one answer, but I will hand over to you.
So I will answer the first one of, how do you get people to eat more fish? Well, I grew up in Illinois in the 1980s, 70s, 80s, where fish were breaded fish sticks that were terrible, overbaked, covered in cocktail sauce just to get them down. I've talked to my mom about this. She agrees. So it's not that she was doing that, but it's really quality, and part of this is, again, when you look at global food systems, really, ultimately, you need cheap, affordable food to get to people. And the question is, especially in fish where it's potentially a more perishable product, what does that mean? And so a lot of people just don't like fish because it's fishy, because it has a bad flavor. And so really doing a good job with it, having it taste good is the best thing to do. As far as repairing natural fisheries, I mean, there is so much research and effort and policy going into that. And part of it is it's really a failure on our part, partially because it's what is our relationship with the ocean. And, there are people who believe that, there is a maximum we should be removing from the ocean all the time, because that's what we should do as people. But then the question is, what tips you over into taking too much and taking more? And so again, there's so much effort going into that. And the one other thing, there's this trope of aquaculture will feed the world. There's also the trope of, if we have aquaculture fish, we're going to decrease the reliance on wild caught fish. And so far, we haven't seen that. We haven't really seen that reduction in wild fishing pressure. We've seen people increasing the amount of fish they're eating, but they're eating more aquaculture fish. It's not that wild fish. Fishermen aren't giving up, saying, okay, aquaculture has this covered, we're going to stop. That's not what's happening.
Okay, well, we're at the top of the hour, and I guess what I'd like to do is thank you all very, very much for both the very succinct presentations that I think have framed the problem and given us a very good idea of different approaches to it in a very understandable way. That also allows the audience to appreciate the challenges that you are overcoming as you go through that. Thanks very much to our audience for providing us with a nice battery of questions once they got started. For all of you, this recording will be posted shortly on YouTube. So if you'd like to watch it again or go through to get a specific answer and forward it on to others, please do so. So thanks again to everybody for joining us. Thank you to our wonderful three panelists, and I wish everybody a wonderful rest of January 2023. Take care now.